Hey everybody, today we are very excited to be bringing on our second guest on the show, our longtime friends, friend of the show, amazing artist, graphic designer, Jacob, aka Down and Out Designer. How you doing?
Good. How about yourselves?
So far, so good. How does it feel being our first human guest?
Excellent. Excellent.
We love what you're doing on your YouTube channel. Do you want to enlighten us and our audience?
Yeah, sure. So I have a YouTube channel called Down and Out Designer. It is a semi, in quotations, autobiographical story of a designer just looking for work wherever I can find it.
Nice.
But
Looking
yeah,
forward to
I
that.
look for work in my show. I make the work and learn a little bit about what my clients do and participate in it like I'm doing right now.
Yeah, Jacob did our new logo and all of our new graphics that you guys have been seeing. In addition to that, Jacob did some amazing work for my album cover recently. Thank you, and we're excited to talk movies today.
So today we're going to talk about Ringu, the Japanese horror film that came out in 1998, and the American version that came out in 2002.
And this horror film tells the story of a haunted or cursed tape in which if the viewer watches it, they receive a phone call from a mysterious girl saying that they have 7 days left before they die. Usually we start with here, but Jacob, what did you think of both of those movies and kind of the differences between them?
I've never seen a movie that made me glad that VHS tapes were obsolete, first of all. Second of all, I was pleasantly surprised by both of these films. 1998 has this like wonderfully creepy low budget feel to it,
Mm-hmm.
and it really got under my skin to a point, I will say. There's a point kind of maybe a quarter to midway through the film which I felt like it lost a little bit of its creep factor. Meanwhile, the American version, of course, has a big budget behind it, and they can afford to put some pretty gnarly effects on it. I do think that the original and the remake both kind of suffer from having a little bit too much of an exposition dump. But yeah, I actually really like these films, and I did not expect to.
The American remake has obviously a much bigger budget with Naomi Watts, and it's directed by Gore Verbinski. And like you said, the effects are very impressive in general. They take a very stylized approach to it. I like that in the remake that they took advantage of more characteristics of the monster. Like they included the use of water a lot more. There are certain effects that they did in the original, but they only did it once or twice.
I mean, I generally am not a big fan of remakes, but I think here they took the right approach. I think they saw what worked with the original and did not really mess with that at all. But they expanded upon, I think, some of the weaknesses in the original. I think the biggest thing is just the motivation behind the girl in the tape. But I think it also does expand upon maybe a couple, like a thing or two here or there that just didn't really feel necessary. And I'm mostly thinking of the horse thing in the remake.
Max really didn't like the horse thing. He brings that up a lot.
Yeah.
One major difference we see between the two is that in the Japanese version, they kind of have this paranormal ESP kind of thing where when he touches someone, he suddenly sees memories and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they replaced that in the American one with just investigative reporting. I personally thought the American approach was better because the Japanese one, I felt kind of asked for too much suspension of disbelief because it was you got to accept this monster, but you also got to accept that the main characters have this paranormal mind reading power, more or less. But I don't know, what do you think about that?
Actually, that is something I thought about. I thought it was kind of weird that the ex-husband character suddenly had powers, and it's why does everybody have some random power when it's convenient? But I also feel and I'm not sure if this is the case, but I feel like it might also be a cultural difference. Can I read you something that I found on IMDb? It says Sadako's psychic abilities are known as nensha. It's a form of spirit photography that enables someone to burn images from their mind onto any solid surface just by thinking about them. which is why anybody close to her can suffer nightmares and bad visions. This is also how she burnt her images onto the videotape. Keep in mind that I read this before I watched the American remake, and I feel like the American remake does a good job actually of explaining this, especially because there are scenes where, you know, the girl is, when she was still alive, is with like a doctor, and the doctor's like, how did you make these images? And she's like, I didn't make them, I saw them. But yeah, I feel like maybe a viewer in Japan might have been more aware of these ghosts and these specific powers that they have, whereas us in America are a little bit more skeptical of things like that. And so the American remake is like, well, Americans don't believe in that stuff, so we're gonna take it out. But that doesn't stop me from thinking that it is a little bit too convenient that that character has those powers. One thing that I thought actually took away some of the creepy factor from the American version was that they showed way too much. I was a little bit disappointed that you could see her face. That was a thing that I thought made the Japanese version so amazing, is you never saw her face. My mind is on fire with what could be on screen right now.
Yeah.
There were also little things that they said in the Japanese version that like really creeped me out. For instance, at the funeral at the very beginning, one of the funeral goers was like, don't you find it a bit odd that she has a closed casket funeral? And like earlier you saw she has like this like expression of like horror on her face, like on her corpse. And to me, that was like a creepy little detail just to think like, oh, closed coffin, you know. And in the American version, that was missing.
A lot of what the American version does help make the plot make more sense. You know, I think help the American audience kind of understand certain aspects. But I think it definitely, like you were saying, it just kind of is a little too pedantic. I think in the original, it just doesn't quite explain enough. Somewhere in the middle between these two, you find that perfect balance of, for this movie.
Yeah, like you were saying, Jacob, when they show her face, that was definitely a mistake, I think.
Yes.
And like furthermore, when they're like interviewing her, they're like, oh, don't worry, this stuff will stop. And she's like, oh, it's never going to stop because I just want to hurt people or whatever. And it's like, why do you have to spell it out like that? Just have her do it or do something or say something creepy, but not like so expositional.
My only issue with the Japanese one was the ex-husband having the powers. Everybody else, like, they experienced it when in direct contact with Sadako or, like, anyone else who had the power, which made sense to me. But, like, when they had the scene with the ex-husband and, I guess, Sadako's father, quote-unquote father, like, then they had, like, a moment together where they could see the past. And, like, that was a little bit, like, really? You're just gonna, like, pull this out?
Yeah. That was definitely the worst offender. Because he, like, grabs his arm, and then he has this whole, like, montage. Yeah, one of the, like, issues we've talked about with, like, clarity and stuff is, like, in the Japanese version, and this, I guess this is a spoiler review anyways, but,
yeah,
in the Japanese version, when you get to the very end of it, and then you find out she's not, like, passed on or whatever, and that she still wants to, like, keep doing her stuff, and she murders the husband. You don't really have a reason to think that Sadako is just evil for the sake of evil. It seems like she's just kind of defending her mother, I thought. But they overdid it, but I liked in the American version, they were a little more like when the son was like, there's that one moment where the son's like, oh, you weren't supposed to help her. Like, she's never going to stop. And I like that as a moment better. You can have that, oh my God moment. Whereas in the first one, I was kind of like, what? Like, why? Why is she not happy yet? You know? But it was still overdone too.
Heading towards the end of this like horror week, it's the question of like how much clarity or lack of clarity, what kind of balance do you need to like be as believable as possible, I guess, but also still be elusive enough to be scary.
Like if you don't understand that there's a danger, you're just kind of ignorantly not afraid. But at the same time, if you're spelled out it like explicitly everything, then you're like, well, it's not as scary because I understand it now.
So Jacob, Sean, you guys we're ready to like do the third remake of this, right? We'll get it perfect this time.
Yeah, it's Goldilocks.
Exactly, we'll Goldilocks it. Yeah,
it's gonna be beautiful.
Yeah. So Jacob, what are your final thoughts?
I feel like I would give the Japanese version a light full ticket price because I think it is a certified classic. It has a cool, like, good spooky feeling to it. On the topic of spooky, I would also give this film a little spooky. I think it's a good entry level movie to people who are interested in getting into more like hardcore horror movies, if I were to say. It's a slow burn. There's not a lot of jump scares. There's hardly any at all, actually. It's eerie, it's weird, it unsettles you. But if you're in like the right mind frame, like it will freak you out a bit. So for the American version, I am inclined to give it a maybe discount day. It's pretty easy to see this film anywhere, so I wouldn't worry about that. But I would also say that it is a little spooky. It has more visual effects that can make it freakier to some people. Maybe it has some like more like nightmare-inducing imagery, but also I feel like you see too much to actually be like terrified of it.
So for the original Japanese one, I will have to go with I suppose I'm gonna have to go with the discount day, for the reasons that, like Jacob said, I think it's really good in that it takes like a nice like more mysterious approach to the whole monster and situation, but I feel like it is sometimes vague to a fault where I don't maybe this is my own intelligence as an issue, but I don't understand what the point was at certain moments. But like Jacob said, this is a classic movie. Like I would still very much recommend it. I will give it also a little spooky because pretty much for the same reasons. It is just a little spooky. The first scene is pretty scary. They have some really good tension building and a good payoff, but the rest of it pretty much rides that level throughout the rest of the movie. As for the American one, I will also give it a discount day because it kind of overcorrected, but I understood what they were going for at certain moments. I understood the intent. I would say that was pretty spooky. I think that they did a better job of using the story elements that they had already developed. One of them that comes to mind is when they like pull the little fly out of the TV screen. That sets you up for the fact that she can just come through the screen when the time comes. And I like the investigative approach.
Yeah, with the original, we don't quite have enough to grasp onto to really understand the gravity of their situation, and because of that, I think it is just a little spooky for me. And I'll also give it a discount day as well. Usually I'm all for making a movie as tight as possible, but I feel like this was just a little too short. I think they could have expanded upon a plot point just a little bit more, and I think it would have been a little bit better. They did what a remake should do. I think it took what was good of the original, and for some cases, shot for shot, made it almost the same, but then also expanded some of the parts that were a little weaker in the original. I think the biggest thing for me that I'll say made this pretty spooky is that I think it better makes the connection of the public's fear of television and its power. I think it made that fear a little more clear in the remake, and that is a scary thought. And now seeing where we are with not only television but also just screens in general, I'll give the remake a pretty spooky, also discount day as well, just for the stupid horse scenes. I don't know why I didn't like those so much. Like I don't know why, man.
Super fixated on the horses.
I know, but and also a couple other things, but mostly that.
In defense of my boy, The Ring 1998 Japanese version,
Fair enough.
I watched this version first. I feel like unlike most people saw the remake first. So I went into the Japanese version not knowing what was going to happen. I was glued to my screen and like trying to like figure out what was going on that way. So when I watched the American version, it didn't freak me out so much because I was like, I know where this is going. I know what's going to happen generally. But it was still a very, very good remake. And you brought up a good point, Max, that this was at a time, 1998 to 2002, where people were getting more and more accustomed to having like home media in their house, and to like put a danger that could be in your house and you don't even know it is like freaky.
We'd like to thank our special guest, Jacob, Down at Designer. We're gonna link his YouTube channel down below, and go check his stuff out. Thanks for coming
And if
on,
you don't,
Jacob.
you only have 7 days.
Well, he will crawl through your laptop screen.
Yeah, don't test me. I will.
Thanks for coming on the show, Jacob.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Yeah, well,
Got to see new movies. Got to traumatize me in a different way.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys, thank you so much.
and tell us, how we're wrong. How all three of us are wrong.
You're taking on all three of us now.